if we tell you that we will compromise with you, you give us what we want, we'll give you what you want, you know, at least you know, in small portions so that we can both live with it. So let's just get this legislation passed. Democrats are now being told, you can't trust these guys. This rescission thing, this is, I believe, in part about why Congressman Pocan couldn't join us today, because they were having votes in the House. But historically, and the way that the Constitution lays it out, is that Congress decides that something needs to be done. Hey, you know, we've got to have funding for public radio and television. And we want to create this thing, public radio and television. You know, lots of countries have it. The BBC, for example, probably the best known example. So we're going to create this thing, and this was back in the 60s. This was part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, as I recall. And so they appropriate the money, and they tell the administration to open the agency, and, you know, the administration does that and all that kind of stuff. And the Constitution says that the president has to spend that money. You know, the Article 2 of the Constitution, speaking of the president, says he must take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That's a verbatim quote from the Constitution. So, in other words, Congress makes the law, you got to follow it, you've got to do it. Trump doesn't want to do that, and he's been refusing to spend money, and he issued this executive order saying that he did not want any more federal money going to PBS and NPR, because he says that you know, reality, as we all know, has a liberal bias, and NPR and PBS deal with reality, and that's just too much for Donald Trump. They will not lie for him. They will not BS for him. They will not cover stuff up for him. They will not selectively delete, you know, stories for him, like his association with Jeffrey Epstein, like, you know, Fox News hasn't talked about it in a decade, that kind of stuff. So he tries this with his executive order. It doesn't work, and the courts won't support it and all that kind of stuff. He's got a big lawsuit. So Congress is now saying that they want to pass this law that strips out the funding for PBS. And this is called rescission. Rescission is, you know, clawing something back. And here's the problem. The legislation that kept the government open for, you know, for another year, and it was worked out on a bipartisan. I'm not talking about the bill that was the tax cut bill that was passed with the you know, by the process where you can't filibuster it. This was a bill that passed that could be filibustered, that had funding for NPR, and it was worked out between Democrats and Republicans. And, you know, the Democrats gave up a lot of stuff. The Republicans gave up you know, or surrendered, or whatever the right word is, agreed that they would fund NPR and PBS. And it made law, and here it is. Good faith negotiations. And that's the way it's been for 249 years. So now the Republicans are coming along and saying, you know, yeah, we worked this thing out with the Democrats, but some of the stuff that the Democrats wanted, that we went along with just to get their votes to pass the legislation, we don't like, so we're going to take it out. And we're going to do it through reconciliation. We're going to do it through this process where it can't be filibustered, where we only need 51 votes in the Senate. And, you know, we're just going to get rid of this. The funding for NPR, and we're going to get rid of the funding for, you know, a bunch of foreign aid, and, you know, it's the stuff that the GOP doesn't want going on. NPR they don't want going on for ideological purposes. The foreign aid they don't want going on because they want that money to go instead to tax cuts for billionaires, or just because they hate America. They want to kneecap our standing in the world. They are not patriotic. They are wed to these right-wing billionaires who believe that the United States should just be a little island unto itself, and to hell with the rest of the world. And so this was the big debate. You know, they held this vote in the Senate last night, and J.D. Vance had to come in and cast the tie-breaking vote, because Susan Collins and Mitch McConnell and Lisa Murkowski all said, no, we're not going to vote to defund NPR. And in the case of Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, representing respectively Maine and Alaska, the reason that they said that they didn't want to vote to kill off NPR is because in many of the remote areas of Maine and Alaska, literally the only radio station on the air is the local NPR station. And they don't want it to go away because it's providing a vital service. So, and for Mitch McConnell, I'm not sure exactly why. I think he just thought it was the wrong thing to do because it's setting this horrible precedent. And this is the big point that is not being discussed much. I mean, you'll find it in like paragraph 16 in a New York Times article kind of thing, or, some, vague reference to it in a CNN report. But here's the thing. If you're a Democrat in Congress and the Republicans come to you and say, let's work something out here. We got to fund the government for the next year. This will not be happening this year, by the way. This will be happening next year, which is an election year, by the way. And the Republicans come to you and say, we got to fund the government for another year. And tell you what, we will give you, we will fund Medicare, we'll fund Social Security, we'll fund NPR. And in exchange for that, we want you to give us crypto and subsidies for the fossil fuel industry and more money for defense. We'll both, compromise. Now, historically, what's happened is the Democrats have said, okay, cool, we'll compromise with you. But if they go ahead and do this now, see, it actually passed the House like a couple of months ago, but the Senate version that passed last night, I believe, and I was hoping to talk to Congressman Pocan about this because I'm getting mixed messages from the media. My understanding, though, is that John Thune did make some changes to this legislation. John Thune is the Senate Majority Leader. And that if it is not identical to the bill that was passed in the House, the rescission bill that was passed in the House, it has to go back to conference committee and has to get voted on again. And I believe that's what's happening. So when the Senate voted on this last night, it did not go to the president's desk, I believe. And again, I have been trying to figure this out, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. But the big issue here, and again, it's a massive issue, is that what the Republicans are saying to the Democrats now is officially, you can no longer trust us. You can no longer believe our word. If we tell you that we will compromise with you, you give us what we want, we'll give you what you want, at least in small portions so that we can both live with it. So let's just get this legislation passed. Democrats are now being told, you can't trust these guys. They're also being told that if the Democrats ever take control of the House, Senate, and the White House again, which may well happen in 3 years, assuming our country is still intact, which may be a big assumption, but let's set that debate aside for another day. If the Democrats ever have power again, that they could use the exact same strategy to screw the Republicans. I mean, the fact that John Thune and Mike Johnson, the respective leaders of the Senate and the House on the Republican side, the fact that they are willing to do this, that they're willing to blow up the institution of Congress, that they're willing to violate. I mean, this didn't happen during the administration of Andrew Jackson. This didn't happen during the Civil War. This didn't happen during World War I or World War. This has never happened. Where one party says to the other party, yeah, we know we promised. We know we said it. We know we put our signatures to it. We passed it. Yep, we cross our heart and hope to die. We did it. But to hell with that. Our word doesn't mean squat anymore. That's what the Republicans are saying right now. This is what John Thune and Mike Johnson and basically every member of the United States Senate, except for Mitch McConnell, who realizes, I think, because he was the Senate Majority Leader, the kind of damage this will do, and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who are looking out for NPR in their states. And that's why J.D. Vance had to come in to break the tie. But basically all the Republicans in the House and other than those three, all the Republicans in the Senate are just proclaiming that they have no honor, they have no integrity, they have no willingness to stand behind their own word, their own promise, their own signature, their own legislation. They cannot be trusted. And, I'm very concerned about this because, how do Democrats, say you're a Democratic member of Congress, how do you negotiate with Republicans knowing that they have their hands behind their back with their fingers crossed? I mean, how do you do that? And if you can't do that, if Democrats can't work things out with the Republicans, then we're talking about the government getting shut down, funding not happening. We're talking about just all kinds of terrible stuff that could happen that could crash the economy of the United States, bring America to its knees, which increasingly looks like what Republicans want to do anyway. I mean, they're now telling public radio and television stations that they have to take the weather alert receivers off their antennas so that they can no longer offer weather alerts as part of Trump's plan to gut PBS. In places where there's severe weather alerts, it's crazy making stuff. So this is, I realize it seems kind of complex, and it's taken me the better part of 15 minutes to explain all this, or 12 minutes to explain this whole thing. But this is, to paraphrase Joe Biden, this is a BFD. This is huge. And I think it's a testimonial to how corrupt, how pathetically, disgustingly corrupt the Republican Party has become since they have surrendered their souls to the fossil fuel billionaires, the right-wing billionaires, and billionaire Donald Trump, and decided to live in the information bubble owned and controlled by billionaire Rupert Murdoch. They're doing nothing for the average person. They're screwing the average person, screwing the poor. They're making life miserable for women and dangerous and deadly, and elevating the morbidly rich. And that's it.